Members of the jury, we have been 2 days trying this case. During all of that time, you have given careful attention to everything that has been presented by way of evidence and to the arguments of counsel, and I feel entirely assured that what the court is about to say to you is the law of this case will receive the same attention, so that when you will retire to deliberate over what is right and in conscience and injustice should be done between these two, you will have in mind all the evidence adduced during the course of this trial, the arguments of counsel and the charge of the court, and that gives me the profound sense of satisfaction of realizing that your verdict will be what it should be. Now, gentlemen, let us see what we have here. We have a man of about the age of 41 at the time of the happening of the occurrence, which he makes the subject of his complaint. A telegraph operator engaged in an important occupation, not only confidential but useful, and he says that he was a tenant of the apartment house. He and his wife went that night to go to the apartment for which they were paying this defendant. That one of the appurtenances of that building was an elevator which carried them to the floor upon which their apartment was located. When they got home, they found a darkened condition of the hallway where the elevator shaft was located, and that they proceeded, the husband in the lead, to the place where the elevator shaft was located, which they found in a condition of darkness, and to get the service of the elevator, he walked over to the shaft and across the opening which is provided for the operation of the elevator to get to the bell, which was on the side opposite to that from which he approached, and was about to reach out his hand to touch the button when something happened to him that he could not describe because he says he does not know. We find that his wife screamed when her husband disappeared from her view in that dark place, and that her screams attracted the outsiders who came there, and finding her in a state of mind such as good wives would be in under such circumstances, finally ascertained from her that her husband had fallen through the elevator shaft. And then one went down and the other stayed on the floor, and the unconscious body of her husband was brought to the floor, upon which she was standing, bleeding, unconscious. He was conveyed to a hospital where he remained in a state of profound coma for about a week, and in a state of modified coma for several weeks thereafter. He says that following the time when he left the hospital, he was disabled from his occupation for a period of about 3 months, and that since that time he has been suffering from various ailments, which he made the subject of his testimony. And he says all of that was caused by the negligence of this defendant in the maintenance of its elevator hall. And he says, because of those injuries I received, I have been damaged in the sum of $500,000. And by this action he asks to be made whole so far as money can make him whole for the injuries he received. He charges that this was caused by the negligence of this defendant, I have said, and this defendant responds by saying, that is not so at all. We were not negligent. We maintained the elevator opening in proper condition for reasonable use by the occupant of our building, and whatever injuries this plaintiff got were caused not by our negligence, but by his own in doing what he did or omitting to do what he should have done, resulting in the deplorable injuries which he received. Each side has presented its testimony, and the question raised by that you gentlemen are now called upon to determine. During the course of the trial, it became the function of the court to deny various motions made by counsel for the defendant to dismiss this action. You are thereby to assume that the court has any opinion upon the question of fact here. It has none. It may not have any. The effect of the denial of those motions was simply that the court felt that here was a question of fact that you gentlemen were called upon to determine. The action by the court in that respect is not to be considered by you to the prejudice or disadvantage of the defendant. At the outset, let us realize the respective functions of the court and jury. Under our ideal method of administration of the law, the respective functions of the court and jury are simply defined. The function of the court is to instruct you as to the law, and you must accept the law as the court declares it to be, even if you dislike it, even if you think it should be different. The function of the jury is to determine the fact after applying the instructions as to the law which the court shall lay down for your guidance. Neither may invade the function of the other. If I had an opinion upon the question of fact here, I may not impose that upon you. That is not so in the federal courts, you know. There, the judge may indicate his own thoughts about the matter of fact. And in England, the court in effect instructs the jury what they should do over questions of fact. Sometimes the jury does not do it, but not so here. The jury determines questions of fact. The court instructs as to the law, and it would be unfair and unjust for the court, even if it had an opinion, to seek to impose that upon the jury.